14 of fiscal year 22 to order. It's December 16th, 2021. And let me read the governor's order. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, no in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted for entirely remote meetings, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means on Westborough TV, Verizon Channel 28, or Charter Channel 192, or on YouTube at www.youtube.com/Westborough TV. However, in the event we are unable to do so despite best efforts, we will post on the town of Westborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate it. I know it's right in the middle of holiday season, but I do appreciate your dedication to being here. First order of business is approval of the minutes of meeting number 13 of November 4th. Can I have a motion to approve, please? Anybody?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
Okay, Hank and Tom. Any discussion on the minutes?
No.
Hearing none, let's bring it to a vote. Ms. Board? Melanie? We're
Yeah.
voting on the minutes and you're up first.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Board, yes.
okay. Andrew? Andrew?
Andrew's got a note that he disconnected.
Oh,
Paul
okay,
is disconnected and he's dialing back in.
yeah. Okay, we'll skip him for a minute.
Dolan, yes.
Paul, you're up.
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Siddiqui, yes.
Moretti, yes. Is Andrew back in? Okay, we'll just move on until he gets back in. So it's 7-0-0. Okay, so I hope all of you, well, most of you have had a chance to look at the select board meeting from Tuesday night, or I know Walter, Melanie, and I attended in person. So my principal goal this evening for this meeting is to just start a dialogue on the fiscal 23 town and school budgets. And really what I want to do, we won't get the budget books until next Tuesday. So it would be really inopportune to try to dig into any of the detail of some of that discussion the other night. But what I'd like to do is get your initial thoughts or impressions on what you heard at that meeting regarding first the town budget, and then we'll ask Hank to give us a brief on the school budget. So let me just throw it open. Anybody who wants to jump in and say what were their thoughts? What did they hear? Just raise
I'm
your
happy to speak first.
Okay, go ahead, Melanie.
So I recognize where they're coming from, certainly. However, when you dial back and look at everything, I feel like this is a town of, they don't have a tax problem, they have a spending problem. And with that comes the fact that when you talk about the average, and I don't know if everybody comprehends the average tax bill going up to the degree it's going to go up, but even if we go to the lower end of things, there are people in this town on fixed incomes, whether you want to recognize it or not, because that is the way it is geographically. And when you talk about a tax bill of $800 to $1,500, that could be someone's pharmaceutical bill for the year. supplies have gone up. Let's say you're diabetic. Your diabetic supplies alone, just your testing supplies are astronomical. And then you turn around and you say to somebody, yeah, but the gym needs air conditioning. No, that's not feasible for some people. It's not palatable for them to go, I'm going to forego my testing supplies in order for kids not to sweat, which kids should be sweating in gym. So there's a disconnect sometimes. There's a lot of, I'm not happy with the number. I think we have some in reserve that we could obviously buy it down. And I got the standpoint of how long it takes to recoup that amount of money. But if you don't stop spending, then we're never going to catch up. We're always going to be at a deficit.
What's the bottom line on terms of the increase?
1,200, yeah, 12 average increase, $1,290 before any mitigation efforts. And we know that 2/3 of that amount is baked in based on the teacher's contract and the valuations. And those are two items that we really can't, or the town can't do anything about at this point.
And what's the percentage increase? That sounds like a 10% increase.
It's, I think it came in at a little over 5%. I've got that number. I've got that number. Walter, do you remember? I know I wrote it down.
Well, the town budget went up 4.5 and the school went up 5.8. I didn't, I'm not sure I wrote down. I just know.
Yeah,
11 point something.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's roughly.
That's a closer number.
Yeah.
those are the budget increases, and then there's another, the big portion of it is the increase because of revaluations, residential versus commercial.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
out of the
about
12,9,500,
Hang on, one at a time. Go ahead, Paul.
out of the 12,9,515 is for, because of revaluation, if they don't change that, the dual tax rate situation, and 775 is budget increases, is the way what I copied.
That's what I have too.
Yeah.
So
That's-
it's the differential between the single family homes, because that's what we're talking about here, not all residential, rise versus everything else, which is residential, other residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property.
So a portion of that is burden shifting as
Yes.
opposed to increased spending. I mean, you need to separate the portion that's related to burden shifting to the portion that's related to increased spending, because you can't do anything about the burden shifting in this particular year.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Not in
exactly.
this
Why are
year,
you saying
Paul.
that?
You can't do it in this year. You can do it next year. You can't do it this year.
This is next year's
Why
budget.
not this year? I'm curious.
This next year's
Well,
budget, and they said it.
who
All right,
has
guys.
jurisdiction over deciding the split tax rate? Does the finance
Select board.
committee have jurisdiction? Does the town meeting
No.
have jurisdiction? Or does the select board have jurisdiction?
Select board, but doesn't mean we can't have
Then
input.
you guys ought to go have a conversation with the select board, because having a conversation
why
here is
we're
not
here.
gonna help.
Okay, let's not, I understand what we're talking about here, but at some point, give me a few minutes to get to it. I want to talk about fiscal policies, okay? And what we as a committee have the opportunity to do, I think, if we want. So
But-
let's just keep going about, what's the impression you all got? What are you thinking about fiscal 23, the fiscal 23 budget for the town, not the schools yet, for the town as it was proposed to us? Do you think it's reasonable? Do you think we're resigned to the fact that we've got to accept at least 2/3 of it as being untouchable? What are your thoughts?
Well, who's increasing beside the schools?
Well, you have increased spending on the town side.
I understand that, but who, which departments?
Well,
which
we know
which
we're gonna have,
services are,
That's in the mud that we aren't gonna get till we get our budget book. I think you're looking for overall impression, so.
Right.
okay.
Without, in the grand scheme of things, there were a couple concerns of, on the town side, there are outstanding negotiations still on some of the budgets that therefore aren't even included in some of these numbers. The school, there are none of those. But I don't know how you go to a meeting, Michael, without being a little like taken back by the size of the number and sort of surprised. I mean, even subtracting out the shift of the burden, 775 by recent standards as the starting number is very large. Twice as large as what I recall for the last 2 or 3 years where we sort of started in or so.
Yep.
So that's quite surprising. I think some of it may be counted because there's things like ARPA money, which has a lot of people with a lot of ideas of what to do with it. And if we don't know if we're going to use that not or yet, are things showing up in the budget and that's why it'll be interesting to get the books. Are people going, well, I'm putting this in the budget and maybe it'll get paid by ARPA, or is it not? I mean, to Hank's point, we don't know until we get the book next Tuesday on the town side anyway, where the driving force is.
Zephyr, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so, try to be careful, but the end point is very disturbing. What I heard with listening to the meeting school, the library budget talking about, and the town budget. All three, the end point, what they're talking about is disturbing, not only for this year, but I see the mentality, in terms of everybody is working very hard trying to present that they are doing their best to this thing, but this is the end point. That need to be controlled somehow. We can only spend what we have. We can't just put it on the residents of Westborough, some of which can pay, but there's a lot of people who will have a really hard time, including me. The way it is going, I'm so much above average. Mine is going to go up by $2,000-3,000. So it's not about me. It's about most people who will be really struggling with this. We are not talking about library, but that number, what I heard, just blew my mind in terms of if we are going ahead with that project next year or year after and trying to build that library in that place. But the whole concept is important, that we have to think that we need to spend only what we have, because everybody has, we need this, we need this, we need this, we need this. Me being new to all this, town government, I don't understand how to slow this down. Who has the controls? Who can slow it down? Somebody need to, all together as a family, need to think about it and slow it down. Because last 4 or 5 years, I've seen the increase. It's not that it has not increased in 4 or 5 years. My tax has gone up every year. And this is a big jump for everybody.
Tom?
$1,200 is huge. That certainly rocked my socks a little bit. In addition to seeing the book next Tuesday and digesting that on a micro level, on more of a macro level, I also think it's going to be important that we inform the town and make a education, spread the word, get people involved, because they might have ideas that we don't even think of as a group. And I also think it'll be good to get these taxation relief committee stuff and the aid committee that I've got going with John. So it's, we got, in some ways it's good. We've got time to plan for it, but we need to start acting now,
I just to let you mention communications. I've had a conversation with several people in the town government, about improving communications. We seem as a town to be driven by social media sometimes, not at the governmental level, but at the community level. And there's an acknowledgement that we need to do a much better job at communicating. And as a committee, I think I mentioned it to you in my email, we're in a good position to facilitate dialogue to get things moving. We have a unique position because we represent the taxpayers. So as much as we would like to dive in and create solutions, I think we have to lead people, take a leadership role and lead people into that dialogue. And when I say people, I'm talking about our elected and appointed officials. And to the extent that we can do it, get our community involved as well. So let's just keep going with impressions. Andrew.
I'm behind yes, I'm sorry. I'm behind in, I didn't catch the event live and I haven't seen it on Westborough TV yet, but I will be as soon as I can find it. Now that I hear that it's on YouTube, I'm going to try and jump in there.
Okay.
But not during this meeting, obviously.
Okay. Fair enough. So my sense is the general impression I'm getting from all of you.
Paul
Yeah,
has a
Paul,
hand
go
up.
Oh, I
ahead.
have a hand raised. I do too.
Okay. Got it, Paul. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I had some things prepared as questions because I thought maybe we'd have the town manager or the assessor, but that's okay. I'll turn them into, comments, I guess. And a lot of the thing on Tuesday was based on, was talking about the portion of it, the $515 of the average tax bill that would be based on, the residential values going up versus industrial or commercial. I'll say commercial to cover everything else. And I know there's been some talk. So what that means, unless I'm misunderstanding, is that all things being equal, their average tax bills will go down, the commercial tax bills. So to me, this is an opportunity to reconsider the dual tax rate. And it's, for some reason, when that comes up each year, everybody just says, oh, that's not fair. We're going to lose business. We're going to lose, development. And there's not a lot of talk about the pros and cons of that. It's always the cons of a dual tax rate. As we said, the select board sets that rate, and they'll set that in the fall for the fiscal year that we're talking about, 23. Although it will be half over by that time. So if they would consider changing that, then they should let us know when we vote on this budget, because it will change the proportions. It's always said that that there would be an anti-business type thing. We wouldn't get development. We'd be cutting off our nose to spite our teeth. But I don't know what that's based on. I've never seen any numbers on that. The research I've done shows that tax rates are, well, first of all, it's not tax rates, it's the tax bill. And if the tax bill is going down, this is never a better time to change the rate to make that bill maybe not go down or something. And I've never seen any evidence that, or the research I did showed that it wasn't the primary consideration on where to move. That came after employees, location, roads, communication, all that other stuff, infrastructure. And I think, a lot of surrounding towns have a dual tax rate, and I'm not sure why we think they're all idiots. Maybe they know what they're doing. Marlborough was shown, by Walter. They seem to be doing okay along Route 20 and maybe in a lot of places in the back, the back areas that you don't see every day. So that's one part. And then the budget itself, we didn't see a lot of. The other thing is that if this is a temporary thing, then I think we need to consider, if we think it's going to be temporary, filling in the gap with ARPA, free cash, other things, plan to lower that rate. So those are kind of my comments that I think I would make to those people that make those decisions. We may not make that decision, but we don't make any decisions. We only advise. Thanks.
Hank?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the conversation about dual tax rates versus single tax rates is a very good one. And it's quite appropriate to have that conversation in August or September. But as we go look at whether we should agree to spend the money, agreeing to spend the money is independent of how we establish a dual or single tax rate. The leverage you have at ATM at the annual town meeting is to either agree to or not agree to spend the money. And that's what we got to focus on. Is the money, if the money is being spent on deliverables that we don't want, we shouldn't spend it. If the money is being spent inefficiently or ineffectively, then we got to fix that. But if the money is being spent to deliver the services that people want, and it's being spent effectively, then it goes into the budget, and you worry about the tax rate in August, September, when that becomes an issue that's actionable. We shouldn't get all wrapped up in the tax rate as we go into ATM. Focus on the spending, whether it's delivering what you want or not delivering what you want.
Melanie?
I'm just going to go back to that meeting. So when she got up in front of the group, she also noted that if we didn't, there's the potential to be at like the 900 range. Do you or Walter recall that slide?
Yes.
Okay. And just like any government or political organization, I feel like they will lure you in with, oh, we could be at this range. And then when they come in at the $900 range, we're supposed to be thankful as taxpayers. No, I'm not thankful as a taxpayer, even at being an average of 900, because to Hank's point, how are we spending the money? And there's a lot of I want, not necessarily I need. And we as a community have to decide what we need versus what we want. And with inflation at 8%, this is not the time and the place to go, hey, you know, we need some of these extravagant things that are not necessary. I just don't, I think there is a mentality in this town that people can, if they live here, they can afford it. Not necessarily. People do come into this region because they think it's close to my occupation. It works for my kids' schooling, and I know they're going to get good schooling, and that's great. That's what we want. But you know, in the end, if you're pawning it off on everybody else, not necessarily a good plan.
Other thoughts? Z?
So when I listened to the meeting, it was all about like, okay, the property values are going up and every house is selling more than what they're asking for and all those things. And if the town valuation of those properties are at that highest level, which is mine, if I sell my property valuation is same as if I want to sell the house, will be the same money. So the collection should be higher. So why on top of all that, we cannot limit our spending to that increased collection with the higher property values? It's not that the property values are going down, we are collecting less. We are collecting more, and on top of collecting more, we still want to increase the taxes. I just don't get the dichotomy. Like, you know,
it doesn't really. So the reason the increase is the relative increase of single family home residential to the other forms of real estate in town. So you're shifting the burden, which say used to be 70-30 to 72-28. So the single family homes end up with a higher amount of the total pot, even if you keep the pot the same. That's what they're talking about. So that's why the values of their, if all the values in town went up, including industrial, commercial, personal property, and non-single family home residential all went up 10%, the effect would be nothing. It's the fact that the people that are paying huge dollars for things are buying the single family homes. And
So,
that drives up their value relative to the rest of the value. And since we have a single rate, your taxes are based on the relative value of your property.
so as Paul said, we should start the discussion. If despite giving such low rates to the industrial, group, still we don't have that so many industries compared to surrounding towns, Marlborough including, which all have dual tax rates and higher for the business. They have more industries than in terms of percentage of the residential versus industrial. We are not doing something right in terms of we are luring them with low tax rates, and still we don't have them. The percentage is so low.
Anybody else? Paul?
I do agree with what Hank said, that it first focuses on the spending, because you can get lost in how to pay for it. On the other hand, the fact that those rates are not set to until the fall doesn't mean we can't get a commitment from the select board to even change them. Never mind think about changing them, and that would affect our tax bills and also the average. The tax don't go up until the fall, and then they have to make up for the first 2 quarters that we paid maybe less than what it will go to. So they talked about increasing the first 2 quarters to smooth that out. Well, if they do that, they should have in mind what might happen in the fall as far as the equitable tax rates. I think it's part of this, but I also don't want to get lost on that, because the increase is the first thing. And one last thing, we're not locked into any increases. Well, we are to some, maybe health insurance or whatever, but those, and I'm not saying that anybody should be let go, but those, nothing is in stone. So the union rates apply per person, not on an overall basis. Everything's on the table.
Let me broaden this out a little bit. I think, go ahead, Hank, sorry.
Mike, I think there'd be value in sometime in the spring after town meeting, getting a few tutorials on the way commercial tax rates are set and the impact they have on economic development. Commercial tax rates are set, commercial valuations are set very differently than the way single family home valuations are set. We ought to understand that. And secondly, we have an economic council executive director, and we ought to get him to come in and give us and present the data on why uniform tax rates are better than split tax rates. And if he doesn't have the data, then we ought to demand that he get it, because we should be working from data, not from opinions.
Okay, good. So let me jump in there.
No, I have a quick question. I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Hank notes that commercial rates, are those not negotiable when businesses come into our community? Do they not negotiate sometimes in order to come into your community a tax rate? And they can negotiate that rate down.
We negotiate.
Go ahead.
As part of our economic development process, we do negotiate tax abatements for periods of time.
Okay.
And those tax abatements are granted by the select board.
And then if you abate, who then does that burden fall on? And it clearly falls on it looks like it starts to fall on the burden of the regular homeowner.
No, it falls on, it falls on all the other taxpayers.
Exactly, which is the homeowner.
But again, we need to, we need to get educated about why the economic development group brings forward these suggested tax abatements.
Listen,
okay, we need to understand why that's a good idea.
One at a time, please.
Okay.
Again, we need to give those folks who are the folks who are experts and who ought to be able to bring the data to the table. So why we're doing this. We're going to ask them to come and tell us about that.
So let me jump in on that point and a couple of others. One of the other opportunities we have as a committee is to get a dialogue started on some of the fiscal and tax policies we have in this town. Okay. I'm specifically thinking of the tax rate. We're single versus dual. I'm specifically thinking of our cash reserve policies. I'm specifically thinking of our excess levy capacity issues. I'm specifically thinking of our budget process in itself. So let me start with the tax rate. And Hank, I agree with you completely, and I've already had this conversation with a couple of people on the select board. The knee-jerk reaction every time somebody brings up the single tax rate versus the split rate, however you want to call it, is immediately that's going to drive business away from or out of Westborough. I think we need to examine that from the standpoint of being of information and data, as Hank has suggested. You know, for crying out loud, if somebody's going to make that comment, prove it. Right? Prove it. Show us how it's going to drive it away. We have to be open-minded about it. It may very well be that we need to hire an independent person to do that study. You know, we're going to spend $60,000 to $70,000 to hire somebody to tell us how to spend the ARPA funds. Okay? Because the regulations are so complicated. We hired consultants to talk about equity, inclusion, and diversity in the schools. Why can't we hire somebody to come in and educate us about exactly what Hank was talking about? The tax rates and the impact, economic impact of tax rates on towns like Westborough. We are different from Marlborough. But we're in our surrounding community, was in that article that Walter provided. Southborough and Shrewsbury are use single tax rates. Why? Hopkinton uses a single tax rate. Why? We should be asking these questions, and absolutely it should be data and informed and I don't want to say data driven because it will rely too much on it, because there are a lot of intangibles that apply to this situation. So that's one policy I think we really need to look at. This town can walk and chew gum at the same time. If we wait, I believe, if we wait until August or September to have a discussion about the tax rate, we'll get lost in some other issues. We can focus on the spending for fiscal 23, but we can also start dialogues on things like the tax rate. There's no reason why that can't happen. We can also start a dialogue on the budget process. Every year, and we know this as business people, you go to do a budget, it's how much did I get last year? How much do I need? I'll add this, I'll add that, and then let's see where the chips are going to fall. I think we ought to take a look at zero-based budgeting. I know it's a hard process, but I think it forces a significant amount of thought to what you're budgeting and why you need it. And you have to answer that question every year. So again, a thought. I think we ought to look at our tax levy capacity, excess capacity. Effectively, we're shutting down any override opportunities because of our excess levy capacity. And I think we need to take a hard look at our cash reserve policies. We're sitting on $16 million right now. And part of that is in anticipation of what might come up in terms of capital requirements at the town meeting through the warrant articles. So I think there's those, and those are just my thoughts. I know there are other people with other thoughts. I'm not saying we have to blow everything up. What I'm saying is we should be facilitating a dialogue to get the leadership in this town to look at those things and say, those are the policies we put in place. Are they still valid and reliable going forward, given everything we know? The budget book will contain, as it always does, projections for the next few years. And we have to look at that very carefully. We all know what's coming at us. Climate Action Plan, Community Preservation Act, strategic plan requirements, master plan thinking, and plus a few at the library, okay? A senior center, if that goes forward, or a community center, however you want to look at it. Folks, there's a lot of stuff that we're going to have to deal with. And I think if we don't get town leadership together and start having this conversation about where our priorities lie within the context of the planning that's already been done, and how we're going to how we're going to pay for all that, I think we're going to head ourselves right into trouble. That's my opinion. And I took away from that meeting, I think there was a sincere desire on the part of our town leadership to try to mitigate fiscal 23 issues. And I heard a couple of times the interest in having a dialogue, not just a budget summit, but having a real retreat type dialogue to look at these things. And I'm sure there are a lot of other issues that they could probably think about looking at. But I've given some thought to it. Those are my thoughts. I just think we've got to, we as a committee, if you want to do this is a committee decision. If you want to try to facilitate this kind of dialogue, then we should pursue it. And I think personally, we have an obligation to the taxpayers to do that. And if we can get that dialogue started, I think the town will be much better off. And again, open-minded dialogue, not going in with preconceived thoughts. Melanie?
The only other thing I wanted to say is I don't want people or any of us to minimize what inflation looks like right now to some folks. And it's a very valid point with regard to when they pull up to the pump, when they go to the grocery store, when they go to get, goods and services, things are rising in cost. And then just to live here, we're trying to add substantially more. We need to take it under consideration.
I mean, it can't be a cost of doing business to live in Westborough that you have higher taxes. Walter?
I just want to counter that point slightly by the fact that obviously the town therefore would have higher expenses next year as well to accomplish the same tasks, whether it's the gasoline they're buying for the vehicles or materials or anything else too. So it's if we do think there's a period of inflation, then one would expect that things would rise generally.
I mean, it's understandable. And I, Walter, you make a valid point. And, our job is to try to balance those needs, or at least recommend ways to balance those needs. But the truth of the matter is, look, I heard it the other night at the select board meeting, the demographics of this town have changed substantially since the last time a census was taken. And we have to pay attention to that. There are still people in this town, especially people that rent and pay their town taxes through their rents, that are hurting. And we need to be sensitive to that. Anyway, anything else? Yes, Hank.
No, I'm good.
Oh, you were adjusting your.
Just adjusted my screen so that I can see you guys.
I mean, if I've suggested a direction for this committee that is, that you're opposed to, please say so. You don't have to say it now, but give it some thought. If you want to go down that path, at the same time we're concerned about fiscal 23 and dealing with fiscal 23 budget, then please let me know. You could do it privately. You can send me an email that tells me to jump off the railroad bridge or something. I don't know, but yeah. Paul?
This sort of goes along with what Melanie said, in that I felt like the select board meeting concentrated, and we did a little bit here too, on communication. And that sort of, to me, was a diversion almost from the, what are we communicating? If communication is, hey, you're going to get slammed with this, get used to it. This is why it all makes good sense. I mean, you got to do that too, but first is communicate something that's maybe not so shocking.
Tom?
I think the communication is key, and part of that communication will be saying, hey, here's where we're headed with the $1,200, and just getting people involved, period. Excited about it, showing up to town meeting. $1,200 is going to get people to show up who may have otherwise not shown up to town meeting. I hope.
Paul?
Well, and it's going to cause, I think, people to say things, to motions to be put forward, things like cut across the whole budget 5%, 10%, whatever the number might be. It's been done before for the school budget separately a couple of years ago, and got voted down. But this time, someone might make a proposal like that. I'm not sure exactly if they'd have to do it line by line, or they could do it on, on a macro level. But that way, it's a blunt instrument, but it's also puts the responsibility to the managers to figure it out, rather than going through and cutting out programs that we don't know enough about to do so. So that's part of the communication too. Is you're going to get that if everybody just comes in with their pitchforks. But I also don't think we should just. It seems like we've accepted that. Not we, but people tend to accept the number and then figure out how to communicate it, as opposed to change the number.
I kind of
Go ahead, Walter.
My sense was that I don't agree with that thought. I think that because of the impact, particularly of the valuation, that they were doing due diligence by bringing this up earlier. Normally this would come up when the budgets were done, and bringing it up earlier so there's more time to think about it is precisely the correct thing to do. So I actually think they did the right thing. And they're not saying this is the number we're going to town meeting with yet. Saying if we went to town meeting with this number and with what we think the valuation changes are going to be, this is what's going to happen, which should come as a big surprise to everybody because it's a big number. So, we got to look at this.
We hire very competent people in this town. We should let them do their jobs. But we have an obligation to the taxpayers to make sure that things are getting done properly. And to Hank's earlier point, that money is being spent effectively and efficiently for the things we need to spend it on. As Melanie said, not just the nice to have things, but the things that we really need to have and want our town to have that we can afford. So that being said, and no intention otherwise, let's slide right into the school budget. And Hank, can you bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, let me, school budget, I mean, if you haven't seen Amber Bach's presentation to the school committee, I think it was December 1st, you really need to look at it. That's the budget that they're gonna vote on. I don't remember exactly when, but it's soon.
Voted last night, Hank.
Oh, the vote was last night? Okay.
Tonight.
I don't expect it has changed, but I mean, the increase in the school budget is 5.8%. And the majority of that increase is related to contractual obligations that have to do with our contract with the teachers. My key concern about the schools is that I sent Mike some numbers that he can send out to you. I pulled together some history on what the school enrollment is, going back from the 2015, 2016 school year and coming forward to the current numbers, the budget number, i.e. the enrollment projection is being used for the budget. And basically since 2015-16, we've had a 1.65% increase in enrollment, or a plus 63 students. So we, for all practical purposes, we have not seen an enormous increase in the number of students that are attending our schools. At the same time, we've been averaging a 3 to 5% increase every year systematically since that time. So we really need to try and get our arms around what's going on with the school spending. And to me, we need to look at what the school department's offering, and ask questions that talk about, is the town, the way I phrase it, is the town getting fair value for what they're spending for education? Each year, Amber has committed, and she reiterated the commitment to the school department, to the school board, that she's going to bring forward a series of metrics that compare Westborough's school performance and school spending and cost versus a set of benchmark comparable school systems that include places like Weston, and they include places like Northborough, Southborough, school systems who have very similar demographics, i.e. they have similar population sizes, and they have a similar mix of the degree of difficulty of the population, i.e. Things like the percentage of the students who are in English language learner programs, the percentage of the students who are in various kinds of special education programs. And the benchmark communities were chosen because they have similar performance levels in terms of educating the students. So again, going back, I mean, we need, we should be asking folks to show us, to give us clear indications that Westborough school system is in fact producing a high quality educated student by giving us comparable information from comparable communities about MCAS scores, graduation rates, and whatever the other appropriate metrics are to measure the what I call the educational performance, how good a job we're doing of educating the students. We also ought to be asking, I mean, the school department, their spending is very difficult to understand, because the budget that we get is not the total spending of the school department. The budget information that we get is the portion of the spending that gets charged to the tax levy. There's a number of sources of revenue that the school department has they're available in the detail of the school budget book, but they're not in the high level summary presentation. So we ought to be asking about, again, my way of phrasing the question is, are we leveraging the non-tax levy revenues effectively? Things like the circuit breaker, the amount of revenue that we're getting, the amount of spending that we're paying for with revenue that's not coming out of the tax levy compared to the tax levy over time. And then we also need to ask, look at, are we being effective and competitive in managing the major spending categories? The school department claims, and I expect they're probably correct, that our teachers' salaries are slightly below comparable communities, and that the recent 3+ % increase that we're seeing this year is part of a contract, but the contract was structured to try and bring our salary structure in line with or competitive with the surrounding schools who potentially steal teachers from us. Same thing around operations costs and transportation costs. But the three biggest increases in the school budget are salaries, which is a huge number. I think salaries are like 60 or 70% of the budget anyway. And then the so-called operations, which is, power and light and maintaining the buildings and just kind of running the business. And then transportation costs, all of which are going up. And again, typically we ask the schools to talk to us. And another issue that we have to understand is what part of the increase is driven by so-called unfunded mandates. If you become familiar with the school system, the state of Massachusetts and the federal government and folks of that sort put mandates upon us for things like special education, English language learners, things of that sort, which we have to provide services, whether we want to or not, that are only partially compensated for by so-called circuit breaker or other tuition charges that we're able to charge. So again, the question is, are we effectively and competitively managing the major portions of our spending? And then the last thing is, with these increases, have we somehow changed policies or curriculum that's driving increases? i.e., have we reduced our class size substantially in the last 4 or 5 years? I mean, if you reduce the class size, it's certainly going to drive costs. Have we added curriculum elements that are substantially increasing costs, or are we adding curriculum elements that are going to substantially increase cost? These are the kinds of issues we need to ask questions about. Again, if you haven't seen that, it's like a 26 or 27 slide presentation, but there's probably 10 slides that have the guts of it in it. The rest of it is kind of explanatory. You really need to read it, and we really need to get folks in. And Beth and I are going to visit with Amber and with the finance director of the schools on Monday. I'll be glad to take any questions folks have along with us and bring them forward at that session.
Melanie, you have your hand up.
I do, because if I could have done like the clapping emoji for Hank, I would have done it across the board. Because everything he just said is absolutely accurate with regard to, again, when you say austerity needs to be employed by all divisions so that we can get a kind of a grasp and a hold on these expenditures, I think this is a town that the school system has heard yes, 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 and they don't understand no. And unfortunately, there's going to have to be some no's here of late, because we're going to have to rein it in. You cannot keep throwing the expenditures off to the taxpayer. You're going to run people out of this town, and people who are entrenched, they started here, they're townies or whatever y'all call them. You're going to run them out because they can't afford to be here, and that's not okay. So yay for you, Hank.
Thank you.
Z?
So few points. One of the things when I heard this was when I ran for election around that time, I was listening to a lot of videos about town, different committees. And in one of the committees, I heard that the teachers' salary is like in the bottom 25% compared to the neighboring towns. I did my research. That's not true. It's in the top, above 50%, somewhere 70% in that range. In the 11 towns, it's a government website. It's a state government website where all the information is there. And I can find that website again and bring it to you guys. So that part, it's that the teachers are being paid much less than the neighboring towns. I found that on the government website, nothing, not a private website. Other things, keeping that in mind, if we have a school class size of 18, and if we don't have the money to open up another class, we can make it 20. Does it make a huge difference in terms of 18 or 20? But if we have to, like, we're asking 5 or 6 million more in the school budget, we need to think very carefully. And one thing I heard as well is technology budget we cut down 2-3 years ago about $50,000, $60,000. If you look at the school budget of $55+ billion, what is $50,000? Not even 1%. So you should not cut on the technology budget. That's, a lot of families don't have so much technology at home. At school, we should be all even with all the students in terms of teaching them technology, which is the future. So don't cut the technology budget, but cut a one person salary, which is close to $100,000, because $65,000 plus benefits is $90,000. So we need to rethink this whole process. And same thing I see where I work and other places, that you can't benefit by saving $10, $100, or $1,000. What you can save is one less person employed. If you can have a freeze in terms of future employments, try to, plan the work differently. The whole thing. One thing I heard, there was a lot of talk about the lacrosse field being rebuilt, so many $1,000s. In the same thing, I heard that people from other towns who don't have the lacrosse field come and play here. That was one of the best things I heard. Same thing, we can share the fields with the towns. For example, not every town has to have all kinds of fields in the duplication. We have some fields in this town, some fields in that town, we share with the neighboring towns.
Z, if you have a pointer to a website that has salary data, that'd be really valuable if you could send it along.
I'll find it and send it to everybody.
Thank you.
Then just a comment about class size. Again, the school board has set a policy on maximum class size. Amber, in her presentation to the school board, did indicate that average class size will go up a little bit as we go into the new fiscal year, but it will still be within the policy guideline.
What is that policy guideline?
We'll have to ask Amber, because it varies by grade and such.
Okay.
Younger grades have less than upper grades.
Well, maybe that's a question you can bring on Monday.
I know the classes are smaller than the class size that I was accustomed to 1,000 years ago when I went to school.
Times have changed. We all acknowledge that. Any other comments? Tom?
Andrew's got his hand up first. I'll go after him.
Oh, I'm sorry. Andrew, my apologies.
Not at all. Not at all. In my experience, we've never really had the school board in to talk to as well. I mean, there are peers, and they should be thinking and doing some of these things as well. Is there any benefit to us bringing them in so we can put our heads together and understand what their strategies have been? Because they do have the nuts and bolts control.
Yeah, Andrew, the school committee chair generally comes in with Amber when she comes. We can have that conversation and see if the school committee chair will be with her when she comes to present.
Andrew, are you talking about us getting together with the full committee?
Right. And I know she represents with Amber, and I understand that, but I don't know to the extent that, Hank, you laid out a whole bunch of policy decisions and directions we need to be doing. I think that those are going to be driven on a day-to-day hands-on basis by the folks who are on that school board committee. And I think, yes, there's value in hearing from the school. I take nothing away from what you said in that regard. But we're not asking the gatekeepers, and I think that there's a good conversation to be had there. Constructive, and this is not holding their feet to the fire, but they clearly are thinking about this thing, the school details, a lot more than we are.
Yeah, let me jump in for 1 second, Tom, and then I'll get over to you. Andrew, I included, when I talked about elected and appointed leadership in town, I included, if I didn't say so, I certainly intended to, the school committee in that process, because they are elected, and they're elected to a position of trust. And again, when I suggested some areas to be looked at, it was not with the intent of holding people's feet to the fire. It was with the intent of having an open and honest dialogue about where we're going with the financial position of this town. So just wanted to make that clear. Tom?
I don't recall the exact numbers, but I think, a little surprised on how expensive it was, the transportation portion of the school committee's budget. I'm not sure if and when they've done a efficiency evaluation, to Hank's theme earlier today of making sure that the busing system is efficient. I see a lot of empty seats on the buses, kids driving around. It might be nickel and diamond, but I'd be curious to even just look at it if they've done one within the last 5 years. I'm not sure where to find that.
I think they have it, Tom. Let me see if I got the right number here. The FY23 transportation budget will be $3.216 million.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought it was around 3
So that's
million.
like 4.3% of the total budget. Or no, that's
Okay.
4.3% increase. I'm sorry. It's 5.31% of the budget.
Okay, so not huge.
Does that go out? Again,
But
my
3
kids
million still.
ride the bus. So does that go out like a mile from the parameters of the school, 1.2 miles? I don't.
Yeah,
What's the cutoff?
we can ask the details, but my meager understanding is that it's about a mile, and that if students that are inside that dimension want to ride the school bus, they have to pay a fee.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't believe that mile applies to students in lower grades. I don't know where the cutoff is.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Walter?
Okay, one, with all due respect, I think we're getting into the mud, and for this level mud, we ought to have the experts here rather than us speculating on how many miles it is before you get off the school bus. Let's keep our time useful. I think the general concepts and the big level things are great. That's fine. The other thing I want to make clear, I did send out an article about Marlborough because I'm interested in exploring the dual tax rate. I lived in Marlborough 22 years ago before we moved to Westborough, and have noted that the businesses there are doing just fine. The important thing though to get is we moved to Westborough because the schools were much better in Westborough than they were in Marlborough. And so while I brought up that to stir our minds about the possibility of a dual tax rate, I preferred to live in Westborough than Marlborough for many reasons. And we shouldn't lose sight of that completely too. It gets back to what value you're getting. It isn't just about not spending money. So that's my 2 cents.
We need to recognize that the value of the buildings in which the business is being done. I mean, they're doing business in the same buildings. The reason the tax rate's going down is because it's a real estate deal. Because there's so much empty property in Westborough, lots of the rental rates have gone down. We got landlords who literally are asking for deferrals in their taxes. We really need to get the assessor in and get him to tell us about what's behind that assessed value of commercial and industrial real estate going down. Because you live by the sword, you die by the sword. We were happy as hell when it was going up. And but it's commercial and industrial tax rates are far more volatile than residential tax rates. In the last 20 years that I'm aware of, residential values have never gone down. Even in 2008, there was not a substantial reduction in the average residential value. Individual residences took a bath, but the average really didn't go down much.
It was 2009. We had an actual tax reduction.
Maybe a rate reduction or something.
Rate reduction, yeah.
But again, average valuation didn't go down much, even in 2008, 2009. So
Correct.
I know people who took a real bath.
Yeah. Melanie, your hand is up. Do you want to?
Well, last thing I'm saying. So we talked about open and honest discussion with regard to schools. I almost feel like, when we talked about that softball field in the Title IX, that wasn't an open and honest discussion. They manipulated a Title IX to make it look like it was something mandated with regard to those fields when it wasn't. Granted, they went and got the money from somewhere else, where donations or raising fees or whatever to redo the fields so that they didn't come to taxpayers because they felt the pushback. But when you say open and honest, it should be honest. People shouldn't be manipulating how they need to get the money and where they need to spend it, thinking we're not going to look behind the curtain.
That's it? That's your,
That's it.
nothing else to add? Okay.
Mic drop.
Yeah, mic drop. Mic drop. Okay, any other discussion? I thought we got a lot of stuff on the table, folks. And I think, please, over the next few weeks, let me know how you feel about us facilitating or trying to get these conversations going. Yes, we have to get the folks in. We need to re-educate in some places, or in some cases ourselves. And we're probably going to see a lot of these folks from town as we go through that fiscal 23 budget. And I don't think it's going to be an easy task for us. That said, are there any liaison reports? Walter?
Yes. Talk about a couple of things. I have to find my notes. So it was a while ago. Okay. Specifically on the library building committee at the last meeting, because all of you diligently read the meeting minutes, you recall that we had some questions and discussions, and I did bring those to the last library building committee for their consideration for being able to report back to us in the future about some of those. The majority of it was on things of alternatives for the construction and statistics of use and things like that. There was one point that I did want to bring up specifically because I was asked to by the library director. Mike Moretti asked the question at the time. He said that he heard that the library is asking people to identify if they are vaccinated prior to them coming in. And Maureen wanted me to let the AFC and everyone else know, that's why I'm doing this now, so it's back on the public record since the question was to, that they absolutely do not ask people to identify their vaccination status. The only thing they require at that time was masks for everyone using the lower level of building because of the children's area, regardless of vaccination status. And they have never and will never ask for proof of vaccination. So I wanted, that point was just an easy one to clear up. In terms of all the other questions we had, if you watch Maureen's presentation, I can see she's already woven in some of the things we asked questions of. Her presentation did include sort of a history, a little bit more on which plans they picked and why. Also had information on the deferred maintenance items that if you don't do the new building are still in need. And she also had 2 slides on actual use of the library, both in circulation as done by, I guess, number of things that are checked out, and also attendance at events. And so I think your questions were excellent and will help to provide the town better information when we look at this. We'll probably be looking at this in the fall.
Thank you, Walter. Paul?
I think you're muted.
I'm running too many things at once. Thank you. Yeah, I saw that they included some of the statistics, and I'd like to see more, but I don't think they have them. But it's something to think about. And then the other thing I thought, when I watched that presentation, a lot of times surveys and focus groups are referred to, and they're used to to prove a point, but and not, you know, people sometimes see what they want to see in those things. So it's not that I'm disparaging anybody's the point that they're making, just that can we see those? If those exist, can we, you know, at some point, you know, be able to see those rather than being the way to say that people, you know, 10 years ago, people definitely wanted it downtown, but, you know, whatever the other points might be. And then the other thing I thought about is that we're talking about ballpark figures here for everything. And I think at some point we're going to need to know what are the ballpark figures for the deferred maintenance, since that is an implied alternative to, you know, going the full way. So, you know, the list was shown, and I know they don't have numbers on them that are current, but I think at some point we'll need to make, you know, some kind of ballpark estimates on that too. Do those add up to 50,000 or 5 million? You know, that type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that is the plan, to get those kind of numbers. And in fact, I think the select board asked similar questions. My impression.
Thank you.
Z?
So I watched that presentation as well. And so many times was referred that, you know, our residents want this and want that. The part which is started before, I don't know how to, you know, some place there should be some kind of presentations that in terms of education of the town, a lot of people ask, I want this, and attach a dollar figure to that. You want this is the tax increase, you know, not on small items, big items, kind of thing. A lot of people they go to this meetings or this public meetings where they want this, I want this, I want this. And that's presented in these presentations that the public wants it. But at that moment, they never think of what's the effect on the majority or the whole town is.
You know, Z, let me just step in here for a minute. A year ago, maybe a year and a half, a year ago, I think it was, we as a committee were pretty adamant that any proposals for projects or other work in the town that would fall to the taxpayer have an estimated tax impact included. And I'm happy to say that I'm starting to see that over the last few months as we've gone through these meetings in preparation for the special fall town meeting, and in the budget summit, we've seen data or figures come in, estimated cost with the tax impact, the potential tax impact included. I'm happy to see that, and we have to continue to insist on that. We have a right to know that information before we get too far down the path of, or as one person said, getting out ahead of our skis and not really knowing what the full impact is going to be. So we've been heard. Yes.
I just want to enhance one thing I said too about the surveys. If those are dated and or not available, that's my profession, is doing market research. So if we want to redo those or do something new, that's my free service that I offer.
Oh, wonderful. Hope Christy is watching tonight and takes note of that. Free service is always welcome. Okay, any other liaison reports, any other comments?
Mike, I brought this up in another meeting. I don't know if we're ready to do it, but I feel kind of strongly that the Active Transportation and Safety Committee should get a liaison.
Okay.
And we currently don't have an assignment, so we either assign somebody or get a volunteer, because to your point on all these things that cost money or whatever, and what people want in town, one of the big things coming up is things of trail work and bike lanes and all sorts of stuff. And I think it's essential that this committee have someone who's mindful of that and can know what's going on.
I just made a note of it. We're going to have to, at the first meeting, we're going to review our liaison assignments. And that'd be an appropriate point. So if anybody is interested in becoming the liaison to the Active Transportation and Safety Committee.
Yeah, it used to be bike and pedestrian, but it now includes all sorts of things.
Okay.
Because it's not
Please,
just bikes anymore. There's e-bikes and all that other stuff.
Please let me know. Speaking of, so future schedule and committee assignments. I arranged today for our meeting schedule through the town hall. Our first meeting will be January 10th. All of our meetings will be scheduled as in person unless pandemic issues force us into going remote. And we probably will have at least 4 remote meetings because we've been preempted on the first Monday of every month at the town hall by the Zoning Board of Appeals. So February.
Can we appeal that?
Pardon?
Can we appeal that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'll get you a full schedule. And, you know, we need to be a little flexible because of potential pandemic issues. But those will be out right after the new year. And we'll also be looking for volunteers for other committee assignments that may be open. And if somebody wants to change their liaison assignment, please let me know. Okay. Any public reminders?
Andrew had his hand up. I don't know.
Oh, Andrew. I don't see
Sorry,
your face. I apologize.
I'm the name with a hand up.
Yeah.
So by way of committee assignments, I also, for liaison report, the Capital Planning Committee had its last formal meeting with discussing what was on the budget. And I just want to give a quick update. And also a reminder, I'll start with the update. And that has to do with the fact that the team generally accepted all of the proposals that were put in front of us in terms of what was needed. It's a 5-year plan that looks out, and we'd been holding off on looking at exactly how this was going to be cut until we figured out how the spending was going to be paid for. So up until the last meeting we had, we knew the items that were on the list. We've expressed interest or concern about any number of them, and there was a package laid out. The big update was that the last time we reviewed it, a number of the bigger spending projects, both of them school projects, have come off the list. One definitely has been pushed back a year, which is $2.5 million for the roof at Hastings School, and one for $1.5 million that is potentially they're looking into getting it paid for with ARPA funding, and that is for high school rooftop chillers, and that does go in part, not in whole, but in part to the question about the cooling of the gym, which, as a reminder, is not just for school kids and they're running around. It's for a lot of other events, including when we have to pull together. You know, it's not uncommon to have meetings in there. To take nothing away from the earlier discussion about should it be air conditioned is just, it's not just for kids as a point of reference. So it looks like they've identified funding for most of the pieces, and it looks like some of the bigger elements are coming off because of that concern. They also removed the decision to start funding the open space, Open Space Committee's request to start funding $150,000 a year to start building up our piggy bank in case there's anything we wanted to buy. So they're going to be pushing that back a year, or they're going to be pushing that back, at least not this year. We'll review it again. And the dog park, which was the second lowest piece of feedback, they believe that the dog park interest can be paid for under department revolving expenses, so that won't be hitting capital expenditures. So I have a list. Before I share it with the group, I'd like to double check it with Kimberly to make sure that there haven't been any other updates to the version that I have. the committee is looking at meeting more regularly so we can discuss capital purchases on an ongoing basis, not just, you know, a flurry of 6 meetings at the end of the year crammed into a lot of evenings for folks. So let me double check with Kimberly before I distribute the version that I have to make sure there's nothing more current. But the reminder I just wanted to float, and a reminder is a terrible word for it. In the 3 years that I've been working with a school building committee, I know I work with Amber, I work with Steve, I work with a number of folks, and I think everything we've talked about needing to address, 100% agree that they need to be addressed, that we need to be accounting for these things. But I also know that on a day-to-day basis, as they go through building their buildings they've been a part of or renovating them, I am constantly happily satisfied with the fact that they are regularly pushing back on overflow costs, on expenses that are extraneous, on, you know, pushing money around so that the you know, impact can be mitigated as much as possible. So again, taking nothing away from the hard questions that need to be asked. I just feel part of my conscience, I should say, it's a group of people that'll be answering questions that works very, very hard that I've seen to mitigate costs. And I just wanted that to be out there as part of the general discussion about a group that really does have some answering to do. And really, I'm not taking away from that conversation. I really want to stress that. So there we go. Any questions about the capital planning committee?
So maybe you can just refresh my memory on how this is going to work. Does this mean that you have a 5-year plan there, but there's going to be a subset that are brought to town meeting as capital items this spring?
So the 5-year plan is where folks look at, obviously try and pace what their ongoing expenses are going to be. But you're 100% right. The only thing that's brought to the committee will be the current version of the items that we believe that need to be voted on. And, you know, by way of conversations, the biggest other item that's still on the table, not including the high school rooftop chillers, is $790,000 for the engine 2 replacement for fire. But of interesting note, the determination was made to make that a free cash expense, which I think is a good thing given the size of our free cash expenses and the fact that we don't have a lot of money in our you know, capital for, you know, the revolving accounts for the fire. It's certainly not built to take a lot of other big engine, you know, big purchases. And by the way, this will take about 2 years to get to us because of the time frame it takes to place an order and then get the actual unit in-house. Between 1 year and 2 years is when it would take to turn around and actually get that. So I will share the list as soon as I get an okay from Kimberly. This is the latest version.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it. Melanie?
Certainly.
No, I was just going to speak to the rooftop chiller. I recognize that it's not just about, you know, kids in there playing volleyball. We use it for other purposes. However, there are ways that we could work around that as well and change meetings to parts of the year where it's cooler and it wouldn't necessitate the need for a rooftop chiller. So again, it comes down to needs versus wants. And this is a community that constantly answers to what we want, and we need to buckle down and look at what we need.
I agree. I do want to point out that the chiller is bigger than just the gym. So this isn't like $1.5 million for the gym for the kids. Like it cools like the whole building. So what's that?
They termed it as that. So that's the inference that I take. So
again, I think that there's good reason to ask more questions. I'm behind you 100% on that, Melanie. I'm with you 100%. Just laying the groundwork for the fact that I don't think it just boils down to just one thing. And just to keep that in mind as we think about how we hold them accountable for the money that they're asking for, which we absolutely have to do.
All right. Any other comments, questions? All right. So I will get you the information. I heard what you said about liaisons. I will reach out to Kristen Vincent and see what their appetite is for at some point getting together with us as, committee to committee and having a shared dialogue or discussion, however you want to frame it, about issues of importance to both our groups. Any other comments? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you very, very much for this evening.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
Bradley, second.
Melanie,
That's fine.
yes or no?
Bradley can say, absolutely.
Andrew,
Bradley, yes.
Olin, yes.
Paul,
Eagle, yes.
Leslie, yes.
Roush, yes.
Siddiqui, yes.
already yes. We are adjourned. Thank you, Aiden, Westborough TV.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Thank you,
holidays.
team.
everyone.
Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah.
Bye, y'all.
Cheers.